Hi, everybody. I'm Carol Kauffman and the founder of the Institute of Coaching, and I am here with Asha Keddy for our LinkedIn Live. So I'm very excited to bring her to you. We met, there was Marshall Goldsmith used to have this thing called the Life Plan Review, where a bunch of us would get together on Saturdays. And Asha was one of the leaders in that group, and I got to meet her a bit and thought it would be wonderful for you to get to know her. So she is the corporate vice president and general manager of what's called Next Generation in Standards at Intel. So she leads a global team and is part of creating a multi-billion 5G market opportunity. But she also is really dedicated to her own leadership and her own development. She's in coaching with Mark Thompson. And what we'll do first is explore some things about technology and then her leadership. So corporate VP and GM at Intel, what does that mean you actually do?
Thank you, Caroline. First of all, thank you for having me here. And it's been such a pleasure to actually know you a little better. So corporate VP and GM, those are just fancy words. What it actually means is, you have a certain level of responsibility at the corporate level, and you're driving an agenda that impacts the whole company and the ecosystem. And the GM part is more to focus that it's multidisciplinary. So it's not just around technology, but it has like different disciplines like business, financial, and all. So that's why the general comes in. So that's it in a nutshell. And the agenda I've been driving is around the transformation that 5G and now 5G and artificial intelligence bring as they feed on each other, and how we transform businesses and what we do and what is Intel's role in that.
So give us a 5G. What is 5G for those of us who are not in technology? Because we hear about it all the time, and I couldn't tell you what it is.
Oh, that's by design. It's meant to be so confusing, right? But the official definition reads something like 5G are the technologies that enable a fully mobile, intelligent, connected society per NGMN. That's a mouthful, so let me break it down. I think if you think about it, right, 2G was about voice and how I would like go. Before 2G, there was these dial tones, right? And 2G was about voice. And we needed to do more stuff, and we had text messages and all. And then there came about 3G, where we had more data. If you remember the 3G phones, we used to say things like there's an app for that. Now, those apps, I still have one of those, is 100 push-ups because I'm nowhere close to even 5, right? But those apps, if you remember, you had to download. And then you had to have Wikipedia for phone or this for phone, and you have to go Wi-Fi and connect it. And then 4G was designed to do more data as we started that there's an app for that. The problem is technology is predictable, and what humans do with it is not. So even though 4G, the killer app was FaceTime Anywhere or video calling, it actually, when people realized they can be connected all the time, it launched all these gig economies, Uber, taxi unions, and all those kind of changes. So long story short, it transformed how we interact with the phone. Now, 5G is that same transformation that we had in our personal lives applied to everything we do around us, like cities, like farming, like enterprises. And so that's basically it, and even mission critical systems. So to sum it all up, 5G has three big pillars. One is more of the same, which is faster speeds and speeds. And how do I do this in AR or robotics and all? A second angle is around massive, what we call massive machine type communications, or fancy way to say if you have a lot of sensors, how much water do you need in a farm? How do you collect that data? How do you take care of the traffic lights and that kind of like more sensor oriented stuff to fine tune energy, water and all. And the third aspect is around mission critical, which is okay. One, in addition to speeds and feeds, the latency is 1 milliseconds, or in other words, it's like split millisecond, which means you can actually cut the wire and do real-time systems like precision manufacturing robotics. So all of this to say it just brings a lot of flexibility, just like we had flexibility in our lives post 4G over the past 10 years. How do you do the same flexibility to businesses?
Mhm. So would you say that 5G is what will enable us to have smart cities? And can you walk us through that a tiny bit?
Sure. 5G and also force multipliers like compute and artificial intelligence and all.
Mm,
So when I say smart cities, all these are fancy words, right? So what makes it smart? Better decision making,
mm,
customized decision making, optimized. If I live in Portland, so my traffic patterns don't matter to you, right, Carol? But now if I have a smart city where I can look at like, okay, how do the lights go off? How do the traffic light signal synchronize so we account for peak traffic times? How do we look at the energy use? How do we look at safety? Like if there's a traffic accident here, how do we reroute it, right? All of those information can be used by sensors, right? Also,
mhm,
how do the cars, if they're going more autonomous, know what's 10 cars about that? Those traffic optimizations, we spend a lot of time in traffic, are an
mhm,
example of a smart city. Another one may be energy use. How do we optimize based on the energy data that we collect to look at when is it good so that we don't overload the electricity grill?
mhm,
If
mhm.
it's not there, how does it automatically shut down? So these are examples of the beginnings of how a city is more efficient and customized to its needs.
Mhm. It's wonderful. You just think of, just 10 years ago, how different it is from then. What do you think it'll be like 10 years from now?
That's a good one. I think very, very disruptive in ways that we couldn't imagine. As I mentioned before, when 4G was designed, nobody thought about the gig economy or Uber or Airbnb and all. They were doing FaceTime anywhere, right? So 10 years from now, I think it'll have elements of Ready Player One in it, right? And basically, if you look at and we will, today we talk about autonomous cars, right? And we can start to imagine what that looks like. I think
Mhm,
in 2030, we'll be talking about autonomous factories and autonomous, societies, like how we interact. So it'll be a much more autonomous world, which
mhm,
means most of the interactions from a connections point of view and preset decision making will be
mhm.
between inanimate things, not humans.
Hmm. It's also unimaginable. So back to the sort of present. Can you
Mhm.
tell us again, sort of, in terms of what's helpful for coaches to know about artificial intelligence? So that's part of what you are working on.
Correct. I think if I start looking from a coaching perspective,
Hmm.
there are a few things I'd like to begin with. Say, this is the disruption we are seeing and the inflections are at an unprecedented rate, at least for me, right? And so with that, it means there's constant change and constant disruption and constant uncertainty. And what got us there won't get you there. That's almost happening month by month, if not sooner.
Mhm.
Including like how do you deal with security attacks and all of that, right? So
Mhm.
back to artificial intelligence. What is artificial intelligence? It's better software, more efficient software
Mhm.
that serves your local needs. And there are two big aspects to it: training and inference. So, training means how do you train? Just like you train a child, right? It's designed by humans. How do you train the algorithms, or what do you teach it to do? You keep showing many flowers and you do pattern recognition and what roses are and all, right? So, that's training. Inferences, now once I have a map and the car is trained on what Portland looks like and all, at this given point, what do I have to infer or take? So these are basic things that we also know as humans. The beauty of AI is that it can offload a lot of decision making. The challenge of AI is it can offload a lot of decision making. And so
Mhm.
what I
Mhm.
coach to think about is not just the technology or the implications, but how it's used, how it's trained. We see so much outrage on AI. That's all because if you don't train it well. Like if I train it on, let's say, certain genders or certain colors, or if I just show, let's say, women in certain clothes and put some labels on it, do you see the problem it creates? Because AI is a function of the biases we extend
Mm.
consciously and unconsciously. So that's what I want coaches to know is it becomes a very complicated world that even I'm not sure how we have the conversations on. But and how the second thing is there is this is around having the conversations and bringing different perspectives. So AI is more fair or just right or more correct. Um,
Mhm.
and so because it is an algorithm at the end of the day, right? And so how do we actually bring and coach and make sure that AI is making the world a better place and not a more uh, harmful place. So that's basically the biggest thing I would say around AI for coaches to know is how to help the folks they're coaching think about it, especially their biases.
Mhm. So I think part of what's so clear in what you're talking about is how rapidly things are changing in the world. And I think nowhere are leaders more on the cutting edge of that than in your field. And so, how are you seeing how the leaders in at Intel and other similar places are managing kind of this very fast-paced sort of super disruption? What are you seeing? What's the wear and tear on them?
Thank you. It's a good question. And I would say the pandemic also accelerated many changes and many behaviors. So there's almost a layer on top, including in the medical profession and all, right?
Mm.
So from a wear and tear point of view, um, I think it's taking a toll. I'll give you the positive and I'll give you the challenge. On the positive, especially for Intel, right? There's been no greater demand for things like silicon, right? We have a huge silicon shortage. We need more of this. The pandemic almost accelerated a lot of these trends, right? Because it made it around safety. How do I touch the screens? How do I do things more? So the pandemic actually accelerated these. The
Hmm.
flip side of it is for the humans involved in it, it's been like I'm more tired now than when I used to travel because there's no concept of time zones, meetings start and stop. There's been an
Mhm.
increasing emphasis on wellness and health and how people even cope with dealing with so much technology. And I don't know that we've had all the answers yet. We're working through it. And then from a business point of view, it means that you're constantly changing the designs and adapting it in a very fast way, which means we have to have AI in our processes of optimization because it's changing so fast. So there's the technology, there's the business impact where you have the needs of the needs of the people, the businesses are changing at a very fast rate, accelerated uh, through the pandemic. And the human side of it is we are constantly on, and how do we have a big emphasis on wellness and health? And Intel's actually putting a lot of emphasis there, but I think it's even beyond Intel.
Oh, absolutely. So I wanted to pause to let you know where some of the people are who are with us today. We see a whole bunch from Greece, Munich, Athens, Stockholm, a few from Massachusetts, Lima, Peru, Malt, which I'm assuming is Malta. Just the institute has become extremely global, and so all of these people talking about 24/7 connecting to everybody at once. People are with us from those places right now.
Good evening, good morning. I've been in a lot of those places and I have very fond memories, especially. So it
Yeah,
goes back to being always on.
it's good tomorrow, good yesterday.
And thank you for taking the time because I know it's not a convenient time for most of you. Thank you, Carol, for.
Yeah, yeah, in London. So here's a question I'm curious about. A lot. So we know that in the field of leadership, that
Mhm.
people are really going from this vertical command and control to the more horizontal of cultivate and collaborate. How do you see that the demands and the fast pace is changing kind of the leadership orientation? And what are you seeing, and what are you guys doing at Intel?
I think the from the vertical to the more horizontal is because it takes many of us because of the complexity and to
Yeah.
overcome the biases and all, right? So that's the reason behind it. And the trends that I see in the ecosystem, including on AI and all, right, we talked about, are around what I'd like to say horizontal too, because it's democratizing, it's making it accessible to me on my phone or video. So these trends, how do they affect it? I think few things. Collaboration has reached the lone hero now is no longer successful. A lot of what I was taught
Hmm.
as success metrics have changed, and it's a bit scary, right? Because and it's the opportunity. A lot of the way so the collaboration makes it where you cannot complete something if you're not collaborative. And they don't necessarily teach all of that as much in schools. And what I found is coaches play an incredible role to help have the conversations that you may not be able to have with your coworkers or to practice them or to have with your family, and how do you absorb and process all of these information. So there's two aspects of collaboration. It's how do you relate and understand and make sure you're not talking past each other, and then
Mhm.
and one good way is to make it more data driven, so it's not about interpersonal. Having said that, some of our cultural drivers actually go against collaboration in terms of amplifying extreme positions, right? And
Hmm.
so that,
Yes.
I mean, you have to almost put that out because collaboration's seeking common ground and solving the problem at hand. And I'm very passionate to talk about it. And I actually think coaches are incredible here because frame, they help you frame the problem, because framing the problem is half the solution.
Hmm.
And in Intel, for example, collaboration is revamped as one Intel, and the values around it are seen as utmost. And I know this is true of many companies too. If you start looking at the values, you'll see collaboration front and center across pretty much all companies. And that's what's demanded of the companies too.
Hmm. Well, it is interesting what you said about the whole um, hero mentality, and that's not what works now. What challenges are you seeing in some of the leaders that you know who have been challenged in the old ways, and what's helped them sort of shift over to the cultivate and collaborate perspective? Do you have a sense of that?
Yes, that's a good one, because not that's a really good question, because I think if you look at disruption, right, you have to first acknowledge it's there and have a learning posture.
Mm.
So what I've seen is different leaders. Some leaders who have succeeded in a different way, right, that worked, and who do not have the learning posture or the data driven to, because it's a very emotional process at the end of the day.
Mm.
Try to recreate those structures, right? And with different degrees of success and a lot of failure. But the ones that have successfully transformed have gone out of their way to be uncomfortable. Or this sounds kind of trite, but I'll say it. It's almost being comfortable with being uncomfortable, which is kind of not possible. So
Mhm.
basically, you're just okay embracing the unknown. And so they'll surround themselves with people with different views. They'll go into learning postures where they go and put themselves and they learn from all levels. And these leaders do not look at hierarchy, right? They look at where people are. And a lot of AI, for example, the needs of what's happening in Greece is so different from Munich, even though distance wise they're closer than maybe me and you, Carol, right? And so it's so different. So how do you actually customize it and solve that problem and bring those perspective in? And I think it really starts with acknowledging that you have to be uncomfortable, that you have to be learning, and you actually will be wrong a lot. And how do you evolve your thinking? And if you have that feeling where, no, I'm always right. I've been right all my life. My gut never lies. Then you're closing the door to the possibility that there's more to go.
So that's interesting. When I hear what you say about how do you become comfortable with being uncomfortable, in a way, it's how do you change your relationship with being uncomfortable? So before it's been, I'm uncomfortable, I need to stop it. I need to do whatever I need to do to stop it, as opposed to, I'm uncomfortable. Okay, what is that teaching me? Where might that be pointing me? It's almost like any emotion, it can help you have a sense of where I might go.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I hear in what you're saying, particularly around people failing, is also how psychological safety is so
Mm-hmm.
crucial now. And I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about what you've seen at Intel or other places of how to make people under this fast-paced intensity feel safer as leaders and as workers.
I'm just thinking for a second. I think
Yeah.
the way to make folks feel safe is listening.
Ah,
Listening with and
perfect.
asking questions versus talking at them. That's just simple techniques, right? That coaches have taught, right? Like if you look at what is coaching, in a way, we all need to become coaches. The way to make people safe is figure out what success looks like. What is the problem we're trying to solve?
Mm.
I have had the misfortune or the fortune of being dead right so many times that I try not to do that, right, where I can just follow and be. So, how do you bring people along emotionally? Because I think a lot of Mark, Marshall, Carol, what you do is so essential to it. I think quoting like all of you, right? It's not what you say, it's how you make people feel, right? And
Mhm.
I think, and so safety and growth comes from how a leader, and everybody's a leader, right? Even makes other people feel in the process of transformation. And then there are other things that help, like, are we doing the best? And then how do you let go? Or the 6 questions that you have. Mark Thompson asked me once, like, how come in Renaissance we appreciated art? I'm sure there were like good painters before, right? Or even after. And that was a good question because I remember I forgot the name of that famous violinist who was at the Penn Station or somewhere, and he
Mhm.
played.
Oh, yeah, Itzhak Perlman, I think it was, right?
Yeah, and look, and people, just one or two people realized it. So I think context matters so much for us to absorb what we're also learning, and setting the right context is so critical for us to appreciate.
That's so true because, if you look at something through the little window, you see one thing, and then you expand it and you see much more, and then you expand it and see much more. And very often you see how wrong you were at the beginning.
Correct,
That
and
makes sense.
that's coaching, right? In fact, I feel like coaches have to make us all into better coaches at work.
Yeah, and it's also the whole idea of sort of listening, but also patience. And it's so hard to like have patience while you're at this fast paced, and how it kind of like the new world requires these polarities where on one hand you're sprinting and you're incredibly quick, and on the other hand you're sort of holding still and being patient. And I think that's one of the reasons that mindfulness is being, seen as just so much more important now. Um, I'd love to hear a little more for you to like open the pull behind the curtain rather and tell us more about what has been like to be coached by Mark Thompson.
Oh, Mark's wonderful. Mark, I can't say enough good things about Mark and also Bonita. And I think with Mark, what has been good about it is he has helped me frame things where he has asked me to show where I can do a lot of things that I had closed the doors on. So
Hmm.
one of it, I think that it started right off the bat where Mark uses more like honey method versus vinegar method, right? Or carrots, right? And so he's full of helping you affirm, right, of things on how you can do more and why not. And also, he's tough.
So
He
tell
also
us.
does call you out when, like, if I'm say I'm playing the victim or if I'm afraid, or he'll call it and I'll say, no, I'm not doing that. No, you are, and this is why you are, and what are you going to do about it? But then once he calls you out, it then becomes like, how do you deal with that, or what is the problem to solve? And the biggest thing about coaching from, is how they're actually your cheerleader and fan and help you solve the problem. They don't do it for you, they help it. The other thing about, this coaching is they open it up to where you have learning communities like the one, Carol, you and I were a part of. And these learning communities are where you create these safe spaces, which Mark, along with Marshall and you and all, have been incredibly successful in creating. So these safe communities become where you learn from each other. And I think, oh, I know Carol, and when she does this, I can do that too. And it just helps you be a better version of today than you were yesterday. And then if
Mhm.
you fall back, you just let it go. So I think it's just been helping. We talk so much about mental health and all right now. And I think it's because these disruptions are coming at every way, our personal life, work and all. And what coaching with Mark has done with the 6 questions, which we have, and the goal setting and the mindfulness, is being intentional about all the things we could do today, which can be overwhelming. What are we doing?
Yeah.
That way, you're not overwhelming yourself.
So let me remind people of the 6 questions. And I first thought this was kind of dippy, frankly. And all my years I was working with Marshall, like I never did it. And so I started doing it around 2 months ago, and it's a little humbling. And what it is you just ask yourself, did I do my best to? And then it's like set goals. Okay, like actually think about the arc of your day. Then did I do my best to make progress on those goals? Then the one people don't think of is, did I do my best to be happy? Okay, what the heck does that mean? It means when you're driving in your car and you're starting to feel, glum or frustrated, you go, wait a minute, is that what I want to be feeling right now? I mean, if that's a real response to something, yes, but a lot of times, we're just cranky. So it's like, okay, what can I do to be happy? Then what did I do my best to have positive relationships? So, you're there working and your spouse comes in and asks you something. Do you just go, no, not now? Or you go, wait, positive relationships. I started a hop up campaign after that. Like when my husband comes in and asks for something, hop up rather than say later. So did I do my best to set goals, make progress on those goals,
Gratitude.
be happy, basically positive relationships, and then did I do my best to find meaning, and did I do my best to engage? And so a lot of times if I feel myself drifting, it's like engage. So particularly those of us who are very busy with children or whatever, it's like engage. So those are the 6 questions that Asha is talking about. And notice it's like, did I do my best to? Not
Given the circumstances.
exactly.
I think that was key for me. Not what I want, but given the circumstances, am I doing the best? So that allowed me to let go of things I don't control.
That's right. And that we can't all do everything. And that is, just as people need to change their relationship to uncertainty, it's how do we change our relationship to ourselves? Particularly, I want to change this thing about myself. Well, how do I develop a better relationship with my drive to change? So, Asha, thank you very much for being with us. This was really helpful, very interesting. Do you have a last word for us before we say goodbye?
Um, just a lot of gratitude to you all, coaches, and I hope to see you one of these days.